Well, good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Tonight we are doing this on a slightly more somber note. I see that we have a couple of people watching already, and you missed the intro. I'm sorry about that. So, I have with me my good friend, Chris Kasakis, and he also is the founder of Artisticon. We do a lot with artists. We try to get the word out for people. We do everything we can. A lot of charity, and just we try to help people as much as possible. So tonight's gonna be a hard one. I'm probably gonna tear up a couple times, but it's okay. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, in the words of my good friend, who we're celebrating tonight, that's just too damn bad. So, Alan, much like hopefully what we try to aspire to, was very charitable and a good person. And sadly, he passed away. And so I figured one thing I wanted to do while he was alive was I wanted to do a retrospective. Kind of celebrate him in person, but we didn't have a chance. So here we are now, and we're going to do it now for posterity. And so I'm wearing a jacket, doing a podcast stream retrospective in my studio space, which seems a bit awkward, but honestly, if Alan saw me wearing a t-shirt doing something like this, he probably would have flipped. So that's why we are here, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. Let me turn up my gain a little bit. So if you didn't get a chance to read the initial scroll that we had, sort of celebrating Alan, there's a lot to really talk about. This guy was pretty amazing, and I have just oodles and oodles of photographs. But in order to keep this within a reasonable time frame, kind of narrowed down everything, and pretty much we're going to focus on his work. If you would like to see his shows and learn a little bit more about him through imagery, and you can see what a jolly person he was and what a great person he was, you could do it right on Artisticon's page, Alan Carter's page. We got to get a couple of those uploaded, or I'll put a gallery up on my page. So what to really say? Said some, but I want to bring up Alan Carter's website. I think that's kind of important because it talks a little bit about who he was as an artist. This guy was an international marketer, and he was really good at it. Worked in the demilitarized zone in Korea. Stumbled upon some slides one day, hanging out in his house. He didn't talk about it too much, but he did spend a lot of time talking about the amenities that he had for the officers. And his really only response to me was, "Hey, yeah, I kind of ran that. Hey, Alan, good to see you. Good to see you. Let me turn the volume up just a little bit for you. Thank you for the input." I noticed that too, that it was a bit low. So I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyways, so let me bring up his website, and I'm going to transition over, and then we're going to come back to the screen that you can see right now. And that screen is where we're going to do a retrospective of many of his works. Not all of his works, but many of his works. The ones that I know that he was the most proud of. And, by putting this out there, as they say, nothing ever disappears once it's on the internet. Well, let's hope that's the case, because I would love this to exist for eternity. So give me one moment while I work on bringing up his website. And I think we are ready to do that. Perfect. So here is his website. It's his biography, and it's really a very truncated biography. I think if you understood just the impact this guy had on the world, it would be it would leave you speechless. I'm lacking in words, as always, but in this particular case, this guy really was amazing. So read the crawl in the beginning if you want a little bit more information. His son really put together a beautiful biography of him. And so his bio here says, an international business career afforded the artist an unparalleled opportunity to both visit much of the great architecture of past centuries, as well as walk the halls of the renowned museums worldwide. Alan was a culture junkie. He loved mansions and fine art and the opera And he would just go on and on and on about it. There were several times we had gone into New York and stayed at the athletic club and had gone to see the opera. And then we would meet for lunch that following Sunday, and he would tell me all about it. And he would go on, and he loved it. He loved it all dearly. But man, architecture and painting were truly two of his biggest passions. Frankly, the guy was so intelligent, I don't think there wasn't anything that he probably couldn't have done. I know when he was younger, he was always working on projects around the house, so he was a craftsman through and through, a carpenter, and what to even say. But so following on, thus, following his retirement, Mr. Carter pursued a second degree at Westchester University, earning in 2001 a BFA in the studio arts with a minor in art history. So after he got his first degree at the Polytechnic Institute, I believe that's correct, he then proceeded to get another one in retirement at 65. This is what makes his work even better and more incredible. So at 65 years old, he decides he's going to go on a whole new trajectory, change his course, and build a career. And he built an amazing career. He was published in art periodicals. He had shows all over the place. And he had a lot of respect from the fine art community, which I think all of us sort of look for, you know. Anyways, where are we? Minor. Since that time, he has studied continually at the Relieville Studio with artist-director Nielsen Carlin. You saw him in the scroll as well in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. If you haven't had a chance, check him out. Nielsen has been a huge influence on all of us. Chris and I, let me bring Chris back real quick. Chris and I actually met through Neil. I was building a workshop, a summer-long workshop, the Riley Workshops, and Chris came out, and that's where we became friends. He had the idea for the first Artisticon. He pitched it to me. I said, bring it to the building, please. And then from there on, we became good friends. So it just so happens that I also met Alan through Neil. So Alan was a student there at the time, but he had well gone past the curriculum that Neil had built. He was just coming in mostly because he liked the social aspects of it. And I think Neil kept him on his toes, one of the few people that could give it out as good as he gave. And so, somewhere along the line, about 3 or 4 years in, Alan came up to me and says, hey, I hear you run a gallery. I hear you run an art center. And I said, kinda. And he goes, I want a show. I said, okay. He said, I have one at Tower Hill coming up. And you saw a couple of those pictures as well. But I want one at your place too. And no really wasn't an option. So it began at first with Neil and Alan. So Neil had an idea for a show. Alan had an idea for a show. They didn't quite gel. So Neil and Alan went their own ways with their show ideas. And in came Gus. Now, Gus is another fellow that I one day will introduce you to in person, and we'll explore some of his work, very different than what we have here. But he, too, was taking classes on and off, although he didn't have to, because here's the crazy thing. Gus was Alan's art professor at Westchester University, and that's how Alan and Gus knew each other. I don't know how that translated over to Neil. Alan was always Gus is always a man to look for other opportunities to educate himself, and he's very inquisitive. So I imagine he probably went through Gus to Neil, but I could be wrong on that. So while studying, he got another degree in fine art. So since that time, he studied continually at the Relieville Studio with the arts director Nielsen Carlin in Kennett Square, PA. This has been supplemented with courses at the Delaware College of Art and Design, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and teaching in the role of a visiting artist at Westchester University, instructing in the areas of color and design and drawing of the human figure. Wow, that's a lot to accomplish as an artist starting at the age of 65. William Whitaker was a phenomenal artist, and he said art was a young man's game. Well, I gotta be honest with you, leave it to Alan to prove a master wrong. So, Mr. Carter has an unbounded respect for what we refer to as old master paintings. I told you, he was a culture junkie, and I guess so am I. I mean, there was a lot to learn from him, and his example was infectious. You wanted to be like him. He was one of those people that you look back and you go, oh, he's a lost generation, because do they even make those kind of people anymore? And has used study and reproduction of some to understand the major elements of composition, such as dominance, subordination, tension, lighting, gradation, color harmonies, balance, brush technique, to pursue his own interest in classical realism. These studies from the foundation of his portraits and still life pieces. The artist is comfortable in working with photographs in the foundation. You know what? We're not going to even go that way because that just talks a little bit about his portrait commissions, which you can see on his website, which is allengcartersenior.com. But he did have his hands in a lot of different things. He did murals. He did portraits. He loved still lifes and a little bit of landscape. Anyways, Chris, thanks for joining me. That's a little bit about Alan. I could go on and on. I have stories and stories and stories. I just found out a new one today, actually. I was talking to Neil because I wanted to use his little blurb, and he told me, hey, Sean, did Alan ever tell you the time he was escorted out of a Russian convention by the KGB?
Oh.
No. That's an Alan story, because that's totally an Alan story, because those are the sort of things he would kind of drop and leave sort of vague, and then you go, what? So Alan Jr., his son, recently this past Saturday, told a story about how he was running a large party because, once again, he was an international marketer, and he knew the people to talk to get things done. And it kind of sounds bad, but really it's very positive. But he knew the people to talk to and how to make things happen. And, you know, this was a time of great corporate growth, and GE was a powerhouse. And apparently one time there was a party, and it was crazy, and Audi had loaned them some cars, and apparently one ended up in the bottom of the lake. Now, that wasn't Alan that did it, but it was Alan that fixed the problem. So he was a pretty amazing man, and I probably butchered that story because it's truncated and short. But Alan Jr. tells it better, and if you ever have a chance to speak to the man, ask him some stories about his father because, well, as I've said many times already, his father was amazing. Okay, so we are back here, and I am looking at his first piece. I'm going to just need a minute. I'm going to transfer over my screen. I want to be able to read the titles along with you. There's some stories behind these, Chris, and, you know, they are, well, I guess they're interesting to me. I don't know how interesting they would be to everybody else, but we're looking at his work, so you should probably learn a little bit more about his work as we go on. So this first piece is the Bi-Hued Apple. So this is a piece that is the second in the Chroma program at Neil's school. As you can see, it was executed, you know, with excellence, as per all things that Alan did. And really what you have here is you have two hues, hence the term Bi-Hued Apple. Simple, but well done. The orange pepper, this is actually the first one. I should have reversed them, but this is the first exercise. And once again, Alan there just knocking it out of the ballpark. And we're going to see a progression here, by the way, everybody, because what you're going to see is he goes through these real quick, and then all of a sudden he's off to doing still lives. And he's doing very complex still lives with very complex composition and really just a lot of subtlety within the handling of value and hue and chroma. So this is the orange pepper, and this here is where you really get your hands on painting with high chroma, you know, full range of value. And the idea here is that you got to get this thing as close to life as you can. Now, anybody that watches this, you've heard me talk about this before, and that is, you know, our pigments never can do justice to what real life offers us in terms of intensity of color. But the one thing you learn with Neil, and the one thing Alan mastered, was the ability to pull out as much chroma as possible in an object. And, well, he did it wonderfully. So this here is the tri-hued object, but you're looking to go, I only see two hues. It's subtle. It's subtle. But once again, another exercise where you're working through three different hues on one object. I'm not going to show you where they are. We're going to move on. We have about 30 of these slides, and I don't want it to get too boring. And now we're moving into a fully realized still life. And this is where Alan really begins to shine. He loves still lives, and he did them so very well. Chris, feel free to chime in any time here. I'm not usually the one that does the talking, so you know I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I'm the sidekick, if you will. So this is the pepper and the leek, and you can see here we have a single-hued object and a multi-hued object, and Alan's now combining them into a composition. And this is, this hung on his wall in the, not really the foyer, but as he came in the foyer, there was a quick left turn. out to his sitting room and the kitchen, and this hung right on a little wall in between, like, I guess, a water closet and another doorway.
Was this done in Neil's class?
No, I don't know, but I got to tell you that Alan advanced in such a way that it really wouldn't matter, because he would have been able to do this pretty quickly. Yeah. As you'll see very soon. And we're back here. We have peppers and onions. Another just beautiful still life. Alan loving the orange, loving the high intensity chroma. Interestingly enough, it was really hard to find high resolution images of his work. And because of that, a lot of these are lower resolution, stretched up. I wish you could see these in person in real life, because the fidelity on these is pretty exceptional. These were really clean, really tight. When he needed to create brushwork for an effect, it was just enough. And you can see a little bit of that happening here. It's weird not to see my hand in the frame. But, yeah, a lot of crutch words tonight. Good golly, I need to go back to Toastmasters. Painting orange. Okay, this was an exercise, and this is a very great exercise. And actually, I would say if anybody's watching this and they're teachers, this is a wonderful exercise to do. Once again, coming from the Riley Aviano tradition through Neil. And this is a single hue. So you can actually see the one hue that he's using. There's actually three if you can include blue and black. Black's just a low chroma, low value blue-purple. So we have to include that as a hue. And that's it. So all of the color that you're seeing here, all of the fine rendering, the attention to value, the attention to chroma, I'm going to repeat a lot of words, it's going to get redundant. It's all done with those three colors on the palette. Now, to show you what a culture junkie, I mean that in the most positive way, that Alan was, right? You can see here that he's included the palette. And the reason he's included the palette is, one, to inform you what he's doing, but it's also an age-old tradition. Right? I could show you 100 different portraits or still lives done by painters where they're showing off their virtuosity. Neil has one, interestingly enough, by demonstrating the amount and range of value and color and the perception of color that they can get in a painting with just a limited amount of color. And if your value's right and your chroma's right, most often your hues don't always have to be perfect. Now, in this case, pardon my language, they're damn good. But, he knew this, and he could really stretch those three colors, the blue, purple, the orange, and the white, really to its fullest extent. One more. This may actually be an exercise I don't know, because there's a couple of the paintings in there. But, knowing Alan, once he learned something, he would utilize those skills over and over and over again, just mastering them over and over and over. As my friend Dave said, my friend Dave turned to me, told me today, me, I'm just going to beat my head against the wall until I get this right. And Alan would just do the same thing, but he would get it right, which, left all of us very envious. For a guy just coming into it late at life, the guy could just, he had it together. He's just a smart man. So this is still life with orange. And what you're seeing here is a reduction in chroma, right? A neutralization, there's the right word, using complementary. So here we have the ultramarine blue, or the blue purple, which is a much higher chroma, a little bit higher value blue purple, unlike the black. And you have the orange, right? So across a Guth wheel or a traditional wheel, you'll find them to be opposites or complementary colors. And you can use them to neutralize. Now, there's 5 ways to neutralize a color, but I'm not going to tell you here because, trade secrets. Yep, another exercise. Excellent. Let me bring that on back. This is much harder doing the talking and all the tech work, Chris. Holy smokes. Okay, so we have a similar situation here, and you can see where Alan has now begun to venture out of just the neutralization with the complementary. But what he's doing here is he's adding other hues, right? We have the blue, the blue-green, maybe even more of a yellow-green to a green. Hard to say from this particular picture. I have to get up close. But, sitting in those ranges, yellow-green to green, slightly over to blue-green. You have the yellow, you have some yellow-orange, you have the orange, and then you have the neutralization still through the complementary, right? And he's also using the monochromatic nature of the orange, the black, and the white. I would guess that the black, the white, the ultramarine, and the orange were probably all on his palette, as well as the other colors that he needed to get this done. And here he is just driving home that exercise, just mastering it and getting it perfect. Once again, I feel like this does not do him justice, because if you could see the fidelity on each of these paintings, you would be really quite impressed. These are sort of blown up, a little bit pixelated. And brushwork really isn't accurate. Sorry, one moment. In terms of when he loosens up or when he tightens up, because it's sort of expanded from a much smaller image. But it gives you a good idea. Rockfish. So this one actually intrigued me because it was so very different than a lot of his other still lives. Still lives usually had a lot of complexity, a lot of objects just piled onto each other, which we're going to see shortly. But in this one, he went very monochromatic, very simple palette, and some fish hanging. And I remember when I first saw it at the show that I had, done with him, and I couldn't put it on the wall because it didn't fit with anything else. Everything else was so high chroma, right? Everything else just kind of like, wow, that's so intense. But these were much more muted, and so I had to get an easel and put it in front of a curtain. I had to find the right place for it because wherever you put it, it kind of stuck out. So this particular painting has a lot of different features in it. The silver work, the high chroma of the strawberries, of Scotty, the cup. There's not I don't have a whole lot to say about this painting. I like this painting, but there's other paintings of Alan's that I just love so much more.
How far into his studies would you say these are when he's producing these?
At this point, no. At this point, he's well beyond. Like I said, I think Alan kept coming back. Neil and Alan are two peas in a pod in that people just want to be around them all the time. They're just nice, genuine, sincere people. I hope that we come off as nice, genuine and sincere, because I believe we are. And, I want to emulate those lessons that I learned from Alan. So Alan could have possibly have spent some time on this in Neil's class, but I think it's important to recognize that Alan would just go back, right? There's a lot of great people that were there, and Neil frequently would have to run them out, right? They would have a little studio space, even though they had their own studios, even though they're well into their career, right? But Neil would say, finally, just get out, because I need somebody else to go here. They let you have everything. And Neil and Alan they drive people together. He created the Y Committee, right, which is a group of men that get together and talk about all sorts of things. Or in my case, he created the Breakfast Club, which I really wasn't a part of at first, but because I lived so far away. But eventually I was brought in, and they've been very kind and generous to me, especially with my pension to put my foot in my mouth, which happens way too often.
Explain what the Breakfast Club was or is.
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Chris. Thanks. So Alan, once again, he's such a social butterfly, and he was so in love with culture that he just, any chance he had an opportunity to talk about it, to experience it, to express it, to share it, he would figure out a way to do it. And he almost always did this through figuring out ways to bring groups of people together. So he reached out and he started just reaching out and, I would say, plucking, but really he was just talking and inviting and finding people that we would all meet at the Country Butcher in Kennett Square. And there were some, fairly big name artists, and there still are some fairly big name artists in major collections. When I say major, like the Met, in that club. And, we'd all just get together, and I've only been there a couple times, but there are other more regular ones like Gus and Terry and Clayton, Glenn, and it's a whole group. And he would just talk art. And, what kind of show are you doing? What are you doing this way? Why are you working this? Show me your other piece. Alan would give you a piece of his mind if you thought it was good or if you thought it was bad. And And then around and around it go. Oftentimes the conversation would veer, as these things do, where people would pair off and they'd start talking across, the table, and then it would come back to the group talking about art. And as these things usually do, they would ebb and flow. And but it was just a group of artists
Sounds
that would get
sounds like
together.
the Algonquin Roundtable for visual artists.
Perhaps, I don't know. I don't know what the conversations were at that round table, but anyways. So Cheese with Grapes. The answer to your question is he was well on his way. There was no need for him to be in the studio at this point. If he did, it's just because, well, like I said, Neil's infectious, just as Alan is. Another Eggs and Strawberries. Here you can see all the same stuff I talked about before, where he's neutralizing with complementary colors. I didn't include the pan and the pancake in this retrospective. I guess it's not a true retrospective, because if it was, it would have like everything he ever did. But in this particular case, that pan actually has an interesting story, and it was typical Alan. So there was this Fox for Pancakes fundraiser, and actually it was like my first fundraiser where I would do art. And man, was I in for a surprise, because I'm doing all this art and I'm spending some time doing it. And then I realized I can't deduct it, right? You can deduct supplies and a few other things. And that was a little disappointing, but it was for a good cause. But I actually didn't sign up for it. Alan signed me up for it and didn't tell me until like 2 weeks before. So he's like, hey, I signed up for this thing. It's, there's going to be some other pretty big artists there. I just signed you up. So you have to have something done in like 2 weeks. And it needs to be delivered like in actually a week and a half. So, get to it. And so then, because he signed me up, I kind of had to get to it, because I didn't want to make him look too bad. Interestingly enough, the whole thing went well. And if you saw the initial scroll, you can actually see him with Michael J. Fox. That is where he met Michael J. Fox. They came down. It was in a DuPont home outside of Wilmington. And what they did was they had an auction, and then a founder of Google matched the auction costs dollar for dollar, and then all the proceeds went to Fox, Pancakes for Fox, or whatever the charity is called. I apologize. So that's the story of the pan.
Is that an awareness group for
Parkinson's?
Parkinson's?
Yes. And I think it's an area. I think it's something that's quite sort of close to Alan's heart, because he has a very good friend who has it, who himself is an incredible artist who's still painting. And it's he makes really good paintings. It actually blows my mind. The tenacity this gentleman has. I think lesser people would have just quit by now.
If there's a will to do it, the willpower will take over. It wins out.
Moving on. Lemons and pomegranates. So now we're really beginning to see Alan exploring super high chroma. And as you can see, it's what I call a chroma constraint. So each chroma has the ability to only go so far, right, beyond its home value, before it can actually start to look pastel-y or pasty or chalky. And so Alan here, no problems. He's just working away, just getting it done. High chroma, nailing the forms, nailing the volumes. As you can see, he loved this technique where he would overlap objects coming off the table, each one extending just a little bit further in front of the other. There is some precedent, once again, historically for this, coupled with a little bit of painterly texture, which you cannot see here. It would be called Dutch hooting. And so he's actually utilizing it. And we talked about it once. He didn't really know the term. He did after we talked about it, of course, but he had apparently read about it. He knew about it, and he just implemented it all the time. And as you can see, it worked extraordinarily well. It's a great tool for creating depth, especially with within a shallow plane of space. Butter and rolls. Here he is again, right? He's got it. The orange, the blue, purple, using those to neutralize, and then moving in and beginning to dump in a lot of other objects. In this particular case, a lot of them are single-hued, and you're going to see this napkin come up again. So let's go ahead and move on. These are some of his more exciting still lifes. I really love these harvest series that he did. Not only do they just read really well, but they're just really well rendered. I remember the first time I saw them was at Tower Hill, at his Tower Hill show. Once again, check out the various places that I told you about if you want to see his. Pardon me. If you want to see his shows and all of that, it's pretty good. I'll upload all of that soon. Man, it's so hard to talk doing this. And but with these, you can see where he's really utilizing, closed forms, dark background, light objects in the foreground to drive depth. But he's rendering them so well, and it's really, 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 really spectacular. These things, when I saw them in person, I couldn't believe how much depth they had. They really just read like real objects. Now, it's important that I say they didn't read like photographs. They read almost as if they were real objects, and that's really, really impressive. He's not doing some sort of hyper photorealism here. What he's doing is he's taking the objects, he's transcending the subject matter and creating this really cool effect, which you still can't really do with photography, but when done well, you can do it with painting. So here we are with Fall Harvest, and he's just doing more of the same. You got your eggplant in the black, and actually, this is actually really important because, those purples are really hard to hit. Eggplants are tough, and I remember Neil had said a while ago. He's like, "Yeah, eggplants are hard to hit," and I was like, "You're not, you know what you're talking about. Yeah, what are you talking about? We can hit them." And then I started painting an eggplant, and of course he was right. An eggplant, their value structure is so truncated. It's so close, right? So it never really extends too far beyond, I think, a value 4, right? That local value, the local color at the home value right there is sitting at a 4 in that area, maybe even lower, depending on the produce. You have a little bit of the highlights with the halation, which elevates the value. But if you were to remove them, you're going to find that thing turns within a very short value range. And that can be pretty difficult to do. Luckily, you have a lot of chroma to work with, but if you don't understand those concepts, you wouldn't be able to do that. This one I always admired. It hung downstairs in his studio / sitting room. Oh, pardon me. In his studio. So if you walk downstairs, you would go downstairs and there would be a desk, and then Franny's desk, which was his wife, was over on the other side. And eventually he had 2 big murals painted on either side. And then if you sat in the desk, you could sit in the desk and look right at this painting. And I think that probably hung there because he was very proud of this painting. This painting was exceptional in person. I don't really have a whole lot to really say beyond that, other than I truly, truly, truly enjoyed looking at this painting whenever we would sit down and have our computer chats and then move into the chats of the day. And this was always there, and it was always sort of a focal piece. Clams and mussels. So he grew up in Long Island, and I think that's sort of an important thing to recognize, where mussels and clams have a deep, entrenched history. And I think he's told me one time he liked oyster soup. Could be incorrect on that. But so here he is, just diving right in. In this particular case, as you can see, it's a very limited palette. Orange, black, yellow, white. That little table, I'm proud to say that I'm the owner of that table underneath there. He gave it to me as a gift, and I was very, very grateful. So luckily for me, I have something to remember him by, and it's fun whenever I get to go in the studio. I have a little picture. It's kind of varnished over with polyurethane. Hey, Alan. Oh, Tanqueray. So Alan would always end our evening dinners with, a drink. And I would say, you know what, I don't know. Everybody else seems to remember what it is. I can't remember it because I don't drink. So I might have a beer like
Tanqueray?
Well, I know Tanqueray, but it was a very
Oh,
specific drink. Up with a twist would be always what he'd ended with. His son said it perfectly Saturday, so I guess if you lived with the guy long enough, you probably would remember his drink preference. But yep, and so that was his usual go-to. Oh, so now we're getting back to those studies I was talking about. These were probably done while under the tutelage of Neil. Regardless, I feel that they show. Oh, hold on. Mr. Alan Carter Jr. sent me a text. I should get you to come on Skype, Alan, because then you could actually correct me and get these stories right. Um, so Alan said a martini. A martini was Alan's
yes.
drink, and that is correct.
I was
As
going to
I can
say maybe
remember.
some vermouth and olive, and it's a martini.
Yeah. So, um,
Do you have any? I don't mean to interrupt, but do you have any idea, like the series you just showed us of the complex still lifes over a period of time that these are painted through the years, or
well, let's see. How old is Alan? He's 89. He left in 2016 to go to Chicago, where he has, where he was closer to his son and his grandchildren, and that's
Mhm.
super important. Um, Prior to that, I'd say he had stopped painting about a year or two prior. He would kind of dabble here and there, but at that point, he was just, he wasn't really feeling himself, and
Mhm.
things were just getting harder. And so for him, painting had kind of run its course, and as much as he
Mhm.
liked it, he certainly loved talking about it all the time. He had moved to other things, so he would go on little architecture journeys, which he loved. He loved architecture. I talked about that a little bit before. So, to answer your question, because I'm actually trying to answer this question in my head, that's why I'm giving you this long explanation. Let's see, started around 65 or so, and met Neil in his early 70s. So he would have done these, and I knew him, long before he turned 80. So he probably did these within a period of about 10 years. So all this growth with, in a period from between 65 and 70.
Okay.
And if Neil met him in 70, then a huge portion of his growth between probably early 70s and 77, 78.
It's amazing.
79. Yeah, he grew really, really fast. If you ever get a chance, he has a great article, reproduction. What is it, a student's case for the reproduction of masterworks. He wrote that in Artist Magazine. If you get a copy of that, we're going to actually see some of his old master copies, which he just diligently and with just absolute just attention to detail would work on. And some of his later paintings actually were these master paintings that we're going to look at later. They served a couple of purposes, I think, and I'm not going to really get too much into them. Some of them were, he comes from a very devout Catholic family. Franny was a massively devout Catholic. That was his wife, and so he did these master paintings of Tiepolo and Velázquez, and Fran loved them. Every time I would come over, she would point something out, and she would say, "Oh, isn't that lovely?" And so that was super exciting. And she could talk about them all the time. And one is where she prayed to the Rosary, and the other one hung in their living room. And Alan was very proud of both of them. And honestly, they were harder paintings to do. So, got to give him credit. I would have been proud too. All right, moving on. So yeah, here we're back here. This Alan called these his trompe l'oeil series, and you can just see him moving through the different fabric effects. And this one he has silk, and he's nailing it as usual. And the green napkin study. If you remember, we saw that a couple of still lifes prior to. Now this would have come before that still life. So like I said, Alan was really meticulous in mastering
So
something. So
that's that's amazing.
yeah, I mean the relief on that is exceptional, and that just shows that one, that he was an extraordinarily skilled man, accomplished a lot in such a short period of time, and then he had some good instruction, and he was able to make the most of the good instruction. Because there's a lot of
Oop.
us. I'm not going to point any fingers, so you can't see my hand down here. So but it's kind of pointing at me, that don't necessarily take the instruction and run with it the way that other people like Alan do, and that's another testament to the genius of the man.
Before his 65th year, I mean, did he have a background in painting at all, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, I didn't have time, and I really wanted to. There's a lot of other things I wanted to do, but just creating the scroll and getting these pieces up. So Alan, in the process of cleaning his studio out, as he declared, I'm done with painting. He gave me some paper, and I took it, and there's a lot of stuff that we kind of like had to throw out. And inside of one of these pieces of paper, or these little pads of paper, it was 18 by 24, so I guess not so small, was old work he had done while in college for the second time. So, and I still have it. I spoke to him. I said, Alan, you've got this old work. And he was like, oh, dear boy, just throw that stuff out. Just throw that stuff out. He's like, or not. Whatever you want to do with it, fine. Just don't let me see it ever again. So, and but what's really exciting, and maybe it's not appropriate for this podcast, so it's good that I didn't get a chance to put it in, but also for anybody that's coming upon this later, Alan's one of those artists that existed, and throughout history, I'm going to come back to these pieces in just a second. Throughout history, there were all these really good artists, sort of compact within these regions that nobody ever hears of. They were very, very good. I just learned of a new one 2 days ago. Was it Emil Jacob Schindler, who happened to be Alma Mahler, who was married to Gustav Mahler, so it would have been Alma Schindler. He was this incredible fine artist. Now, he died. He lived a terrible life. Was pretty poor and didn't do great. But his skills were amazing, and nobody outside of the people within his country, which I should know the country. I want to say Austria. Yes, Austria. Know who he is. I'm sure there's art historians, and so I feel like Alan is, amongst those people that, while respected within the fine art community, especially regionally, he's one of those artists that, when you look back historically, you're going to find is just a great artist working in an area. Unfortunately, he may never receive that, worldwide acclaim that he would deserve, like so many others. But he was there, and he did it, and he was good. And for anybody that's just getting started, it's never too late to start. Alan proves this.
And worldwide claim isn't everything.
No, it's not. It's not. But
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
that's a.
We have an accomplished artist with a great body of work, and I think he left an impression on those important to him and in his community. So that's what matters.
He left a profound impression on a lot of people in many ways. I mean, he just helped people all the time. He had a saying. I'm going to pull this from Alan Carter Jr. I had forgotten that he had said this a couple times, but I guess it kind of just washed off my shoulders. Is that even a saying? I don't think so. But so Alan brought it up on Saturday, and he said, Alan's saying was, "We are all the walking wounded," and I think that's pretty true. But what Alan did was he really wanted to bring together everybody and to help the walking wounded. If he could raise you up, that was a skill that he had that very few people did. And he seemed to do it effortlessly. But I wonder, if there was an emotional toll there too. I mean, it's kind of hard having a lot of people leaning on you all the time. And so,
absolutely.
Which then maybe shows the strength and the character of the man as well. So, anyways, back on topic. It's never too late to start. Alan shows this. He did it within a short period of time. We see him utilizing these techniques over and over again. And I found some of his old work. Kind of glad that I'm not including it. I feel like maybe we should, just so people could see that you can get really good really, really fast. But we're not going to include it. We're not going to show it. It'll just sit in my library, or maybe I'll mail it back to you, Mr. Carter Jr. It probably should be in your hands. Oh no, I spelled orange wrong. So Velvet, looks like Velvet, does the job. Another one of his series. Yeah, it's a great painting. gets the job done. For me, it doesn't do as much for me emotionally and technically as some of the more complex still lives. But they're not supposed to. These are studies. They're just learning how to do this or figuring out how you're going to use this fabric in a larger, more complex piece, which is how historically people would have painted. And Alan, of course, knew that. I'll have to fix that in post, except there is no post. So, Alan was an international businessman, and he had contacts everywhere. I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carter, Alan once told me that he had an office on every continent but Australia, which to me seems insane. I mean, and he's seen the world. In his house he had wonderful relics from places like Iran. I mean, how difficult is it to get in Iran, let alone get anything out today? But he had them. So he experienced the world, in a time long before, you and I could possibly understand. Through his ventures as a businessman, he became well liked and well respected by a lot of people. So in this particular case, this is a portrait of George Frolic Weymouth. Now, if nobody knows, George Frolic Weymouth started the Brandywine Conservatory and the Brandywine River Museum, which is regionally loved for its strong still life regional work as well as its extensive illustrative collection, but with a focus on Andrew Wyeth. I have a C. Clay back there, and N.C. Wyeth, as well as Howard Pyle, and that whole area is sort of rife with historical importance in the golden age of illustration. We've talked about this before, certainly on the Artisticon stuff. So, but this gentleman was a good friend of Alan's, and did a portrait of him, and it looks just like him. Which, as anybody that does a portrait should tell you, that's kind of the most important part. So this hung in Frolic's house, and then upon his passing, it was given back to Alan. But Alan always had a Z. Clay hanging in his house. He liked this painting. What are we looking at here? Wow, we're almost at an hour. Oh, so talking about Alan and talking about his love for culture, Alan loved master paintings. I told you he wrote a piece about that for the Artist magazine. And now we're going to get into a series where he would slavishly just work at these paintings. He would work at them for a very long time, and he would get them right. And so we'll move through here. There's not a lot I can really say. I mean, you're copying master paintings. You can't get better than a master painting, and they're great educational tools. I could tell you what the masters were thinking at the time, but I really don't know, and I'm certainly not skilled enough or intelligent enough to be able to sort of assume. I can't travel in time and talk to them. The best person for the job would have been Alan, right? Alan spent some time studying these things, so he would have been the guy to tell you, at least, through his work and study, what his impressions of what they were thinking at the time. Unfortunately, we won't know. But here we have the master study after John Singer Sargent, A Street in Venice. This hung in his living room. He loved it. He loved this piece. Another study after Velázquez. Now, if you're a painter, chances are you love Velázquez, especially if you're a representational painter. I think Sargent loved Velázquez. Duran loved Velázquez, Sargent's teacher. But generally speaking, if you are a representational painter, you will almost always cite Velázquez as a inspiration. Now, I'm generalizing, but rarely have I met a representational painter that hasn't said Velázquez. His body of work is just so special. And interestingly enough, as you read through the diaries of other artists in antiquity, you will find that they cite Velázquez too. So it's only natural that Alan would visit this. Also, you can see here, once again, he's doing a lot with a very limited palette. We see this happening over and over again, right? We can go back to that still life, painting orange, black, orange, white. There was actually a couple other colors because I worked on a palette for a book that he was working on with him on this, and so he had a few other colors in there. But there, once again, there were variations of orange, like burnt sienna. So. Juan de Pareja. This hangs in the Met. Alan gushes over this painting, love this painting. And I would say that this is a favorite among people that are copying Velázquez. It's just really accessible as a painting. It's exciting as a painting. The history behind it is sort of vague, but the idea is that this was effectively a servant of Velázquez, who, by the way, later went on to have a very successful, to be freed, and then have a career, or at least a minor career as an artist. But this is believed to be a preliminary study or a painting for, potentially a painting for either a bishop or a pope. I'd have to go back and look. It's been a while. So, but this painting in the Met is marvelous, and it's not a surprise that Alan was attracted to it, because I think a lot of us who paint are. There's something about it that is so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Luscious?
Yeah, no, I'm at a lack. I'm a lack. It looks. I'm at a lack for words. It looks simple, but man, it is so well executed and so painterly, and it just has all those wonderful attributes that a painter loves, in a painting. So excellent, rendering, excellent drawing, excellent attention to value, and then, like I said, it's painterly. So it's giving you a little bit of everything. And this is under glass. It's not surprising it's under glass, because you really do want to touch it. So this is just a grisaille, but not just any grisaille. Here he is. He's going after Caravaggio. It's another typo. What's wrong with me? Anyways, this is Supper at Emmaus. Supper at Emmaus by Caravaggio. I am going to upload another video with the right spellings. It drives me nuts. So, it's a good. This is huge. It hung in his. Where did it hang? I think it hung in his dining room, which was this sort of orange stucco material. It's very interesting. It had this lovely texture. It was a bright orange, and this hung on the back wall next to the table, I believe. And it's muted values, but still within the orange family, created a really nice contrast, especially when you turned on the lights in there. It's pretty nice. So these are last two major paintings that he did. And I actually probably want to say, the other one's not here. That's by Tiepolo. I didn't include that. Just seemed to me like I was running a bit long on time, as we've certainly almost hit an hour now, and we don't want to go too much further than that. So the master study after Velázquez, Coronation of the Virgin. This one was, I believe, hung in the bedroom, and it was Franny would pray to the rosary here, and Franny loved this painting. She showed me this painting probably about 20 times. So, and Alan, he really enjoyed this painting too. He felt like he did a lot of things here right. Certainly, it's a complex painting, and to be able to once again copy a master was a big deal to Alan. Should have included the Tiepolo one, because that was a really nice piece, but not tonight. He dabbled in landscape. It wasn't something he did a lot of. I can only name maybe 4 or 5 pieces that he did. I don't believe that they were necessarily his passion, at least the same way that the master paintings and the still lifes and the portraiture was. But there was something else he loved to do, and I only have 2 pictures here. There's a couple, and I think you can find them on his Facebook page. And here he loved to do murals. And so if you were to walk into different parts of his house, whether it was the one down in Rehoboth Beach or the one in Greenville, he would have these murals, and they would greet you, and then he would have these lovely firecracker plants off to the side, and there was always some sort of art painted somewheres in a way that he felt embellished and not only showed off his artistic ability, but made a place sort of interesting to walk into. You didn't walk into white walls. You walked into Alan's place, and Alan was always one to really make sure that he could embellish something to look beautiful. And he had a very classic sense of taste and style. And yeah, so this was his way of making or taking that and making it be even more exciting. How can it stay classical but yet add something to a room and make it his? And he had these all over. We're going to go do another one. He had some. He didn't do these, but he had these 2 folding doors. Later on, he had these folding door murals downstairs by his computer, and he would open them up, and you were looking out into a park, and they framed a window, and he took some time really planning it out. Had a carpenter come out and rebuild it, and I remember first time he had them done, and he was like, "Oh, he just got them finished. Come check them out." And he opened them up, and he's like, "Isn't that lovely?" And then, there's a mansion off in the distance, and it was really, really quite beautiful. So I actually really, really, really like these ones, though. These were in his beach house condo, and he has several, but these were really, really, really nice, and very different stylistically, right? So you see sort of a posterization of colors, and more of a attempt to emulate a fresco style, and so these are always nice. And he had a bunch of these in his beach house, and they were nice. It was only there once, but they certainly left a lasting impression. And we're back to the beginning. Short but sweet. Or maybe not so short. It was 59 minutes and 56 seconds. I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to find my end credits. So, Chris, thanks for joining me tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great body of work for really a short period of time, if you think about it, and at his age. And master draftsman and painter. It's just amazing at that age. Thank you for sharing it with us. And, this will be up in archives for those who have missed it. Please take a look. And also, we thank Sean for his heartfelt comments. And, this was a good friend of his, and it's a wonderful testament to his life.
There are a few people like him left in the world, and he was a pretty special person. And I'm kind of hitting that nail over and over again, and I'm sorry, folks. It's just kind of hard to really sort of express just how amazing he was. But the one thing that is just really important to take away from this is, and I've said this over and over again, it's kind of in the lead-in, he was a testament to the tenacity of getting to do... Let me just start over. He was a testament to the idea of being tenacious, not giving up, going for whatever it is you want at whatever age you want. He was just exceptional at getting things done, and he would get them done well, and he was focused. And if right now you're sitting somewheres and you're questioning yourself, if you're one of the walking wounded and you're going, man, maybe I shouldn't consider down this career path. Well,
and I'm sure there are many right now in our class.
I mean, look, kind of one of them. But if you're sitting there and you're the walking wounded and you're asking yourself, man, I'm about to give up. I'm not going to be an artist, or I'm not going to be a trapeze artist, or I'm not going to be a professional ATV. I don't even know what that is, but I've seen them on TV, I think, once or twice. Or maybe you want to be an actor. I don't know what your success level is going to be. But I don't think Alan would subscribe to the idea of giving up. Actually, I think he'd probably tell you to work harder. And, go for it. Just don't be afraid, and all those cliches, which in this case are not cliche, because I think he showed over and over again. He has shown over and over again that he is that you can do it. So don't give up and go for it. So I'm actually excited because this kind of led the way into sort of this idea that maybe we could feature artists that people don't know about, both in antiquity
Absolutely.
and in current times. And
Well, what I love what you've done is for his tribute. I never met Alan personally, but I've heard you speak about him. Neil's spoken about him, but I feel like I know the man through his stories and his work, and that is a legacy to leave behind. And as we say in Greek, his memory be eternal, and when someone passes, and truly, his memory be eternal.
So don't give up. Get to it. Get it done. And if there's something you really want to do, maybe don't wait. So take take the route of Alan Carter. All right, everybody, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time. I'm Sean. That's Chris.
Chris.
Have a great night. Goodbye.
Good night.